I call the February 4th Assembly Finance Committee meeting to order. Ms. Wendell, will you note the roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. We have all Assembly members present in chambers besides Assembly members Steininger and Hall, who are absent, and Assembly member Atkinson, who is available on Zoom.
Thank you. That brings us to item C, approval of minutes. You have the January 7th Assembly Finance Committee meeting minutes. Any changes to those? Seeing none, those are so moved. That brings us to agenda topics. We're going to start with some partner agency presentations. Miss Perry with Travel Juneau, you are up first. So if you would join us here, we will get your slides up on the screen. And these microphones work similar to our old ones. So you will just press the button and it'll turn green and then you can speak.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I would like to also introduce Serene Hutchinson, who is co-chair of the Travel Juneau Board. She is in attendance with me tonight. As a priority partner to CVJ, Travel Juneau is proud of its efforts on behalf of the city, promoting Juneau as an entire destination for visitors for year-round fun. And over the years, the organization has taken on and enhanced visitor programs that benefit Juneau overall, including the Crossing Guard program, Tourism Best Management Practices, otherwise known as TBMP. We are a pass-through administrator for those important local programs, and we believe we have demonstrated the effectiveness of those programs, and they are always under continuous improvement. We have a number of meetings in our pipeline. Your packet contains a couple of reports. One is a pipeline report, which shows all of the meetings, conventions that we are pursuing at this point. So these are organizations that we have found, we have prospected. Also, these are some organizations that have contacted us directly and said, we're interested in doing a meeting in Juneau. How do we even start? So that list is in your packet, and we have meetings that are into 2028, and we also have some planners who are actually starting to look into 2029. So planners are looking to really get things secure several years ahead of the proposed meeting. It's very different when you're on the other side. If you're an attendee, for example, we have found that attendees will tend to run up until almost that last minute to get their hotel spaces. So we have to work with that on both sides, both the long run for the planner and then that kind of short run, making sure that attendees have the information that they need to get to Juneau and have all the hotel information and so forth. We secured 19 meetings for fiscal 26 so far, with an estimated economic impact of over $3.5 million. In the pipeline, we've got about $8.3 million worth of business that is either secured or we're looking to secure again over the next 3 or so years. I would ask you to maybe refer to the page 15 of 73 in your packet to note the media audience size. You will see that we were able to reach over 10 million people for those audiences, and that would include anything that's video, basically. So if it's a TV program, if it's a mention, if someone has done a video on our behalf, or we have partnered with a videographer, that is included in that audience. We also just over, for this fiscal, we've already got about $126,000 just in media publicity. So when Juneau is mentioned, when Travel Juneau is mentioned, that registers as a dollar value. So this is return on our efforts that we may or may not even have had to pay for. A lot of times media will call and say, hey, I just need some information, or can you back up these facts and do some fact checking? And we're happy to do that because we want good information out there. It doesn't cost us anything but some staff time, but then Juneau gets out into the domain with accurate information. We are seeing a really sizable increase in the number of folks on our website who are looking for information or who are inquiring to get Our guides, I will point out the travel planner and the guide that I have for those of you who are not in attendance at the Lands Committee. These are two publications that we have done for the last couple of years. You're probably familiar with the planner, which is the thicker, heftier version. These are designed for people who are looking to travel to Juneau. They haven't decided what it is that they're wanting to do, and maybe they haven't even decided how they're going to get here. So this is to inspire them, to show them what's available, and really get them down in that funnel to make that final purchase. The smaller publication, more magazine-like, is a welcome guide. It is basically the last half of the planner with no attendant context with it, or additional content. And we use these for meetings, conventions, and we have them available at our visitor information sites. It's also very popular for Christy Switzer, who is our destination marketing manager, to take with her to trade shows, for example. They're smaller, they roll up, and we have seen a lot less waste with them. So they're highly popular, and this is our second summer for doing that. I'll also mention that these pieces are available to the public at any time. All they have to do is call the office and request one. You can request one at the website. We have them available outside of our office. We will have the welcome guides available at all of our visitor sites as well. So readily available to anyone who wants one. Looking ahead to the 26th season, we are going to undergo a number of initiatives. The board just met in retreat last Thursday and discussed these items, so we're moving ahead. We are aligning the organization to become not only destination marketing, but destination management, and that helps us in the realm of the management pieces like the crossing guards and TBMP, and also sitting in with other organizations who, for example, want to bring in an event. How do they want to grow that event? Is there an opportunity for us to provide, for example, some seed money to grow that event if, when they have demonstrated that there is a huge potential to get outside visitors in, in a big way. So we have a whole matrix that we use to gauge that level of support so that we're being fair with that money. We're also going to shift to paid staff at the visitor centers this year. As I have spoken with many of you over the last several years, especially post-COVID, we have seen a reduction in volunteers, and we've seen a reduction in the number of volunteers who are willing to sign up for a regular shift at those visitor centers. That has made scheduling a huge nightmare for our office, and truly staff has had to go out a couple hundred hours a season to cover call-outs, to cover just people missing in shifts. We feel that this is a way to provide really stable hours for those visitor center, and we will have some accountability, more accountability with how information is delivered at those centers and how they and how these staff engage with visitors. When you have volunteers, you don't always have that level of accountability, but we do now. So I think this will be an improvement in our ability to get education and get information to our visitors. We are going to, and we're working on this right now, we're exploring ways that we can provide education to our inbound visitors. We can manage their expectations, working really closely with CBJ and with the Forest Service, for example, when we have a GLOF, and making sure we're rolling out communications as desired for everybody, and so that our visitors know that they either will or probably won't be impacted. We don't want to scare anybody, but we also want to make sure that people have the information they need before they get into town. And we plan to deliver extra partner education as well, more B2B meetings for them, more opportunities for them to engage with each other and get some valuable marketing education as well. We're, of course, highly localized. We are dedicated to promoting Juneau specifically, and our team is just heads down getting that done over the winter. We want to, and we'll be, we want to address the visitor experience. We want to make sure that visitors are having the best Juneau experience they can. They have gotten, again, correct information. They have not been led astray. They have someplace to go if they have questions or concerns. That's part of our role as well. One of the things we need to do in the near future is to assess the Juneau brand and assess the Travel Juneau brand as it resonates with inbound visitors. So this will be something we take up probably in the next year, year and a half toward a new website, for example. We need to have that information before we can start planning a site and planning all of the imagery and the layout of that site, which will be a 2 to 3 year process. We want to make sure that Travel Juneau is participating in discussions on workforce development, employee housing, and other state or citywide issues that impact that visitor experience and or our partners' businesses. I think this body fully, understands the critical need for housing all the way across the board, and certainly workforce housing and workforce development are things that we're keeping an eye on, working with other economic development organizations in town, as well as the Alaska Travel Industry Association as they approach these issues. So with that, I believe I will open the floor to questions from the group, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding our request or our past work.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Questions? Mayor Weldon.
We'll start with the softball ones first. How many employees do you have?
7.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Perry. I know in recent years, there's been a lot asked about, tracking of metrics and, independent visitation. I don't know if it's in your mission, but nonetheless, I know it's a goal of yours. I know that can be a tricky thing to track. I'm just curious on, your tracking capabilities and if you're seeing any trends in that, independent visitor sector that we do care about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Through the chair, we are subscribed to Placer AI, which is a huge data set. And we have spent the last several months developing reports and laying out our geofences so that we can see who's visiting inside various areas of town. There are, of course, areas that we do not have access to. So, for example, Bartlett is considered a sensitive area, so we do not have access to information in there. We don't have access to the legislative building either. So there are areas in town that are kind of taken off the grid, if you will, that we don't. However, what we are doing right now is carefully geofencing, for example, the water where the ships are right up next to the dock versus upland of that and along Franklin and into the downtown area where we can see where people are off of the ship and actually moving around. So I anticipate very shortly being able to deliver regular reports to this body, to our board, to our partners about the numbers of people who are actually coming through town and providing something that looks like a heat map to show where they are going once they are here. That information will also be accompanied with some demographic data so we can see where they came from, some basic economics about what their spending is and their capacity. So I hope to be able to deliver that to the body very, very soon.
Ms. Hughes Gandius.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That sounds very cool about the geofencing. Thanks for being here. Following up on that same question, that'll show, I can see that tool as being super useful in several facets of managing the behavior. I know we've talked about in the past our hotel stock, and you already referenced the challenge of having something planned, but people don't like to book their rooms right up into the last minute. And in my mind, the other piece besides seeing where people are
is us having a good sense throughout the year of what is the, I guess, vacancy rate, or I can't think of the correct industry term for that, but what is our percentage capacity that we're using our hotels and how often are they over? So could you speak about that, where we are and having that data?
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. And through the chair, I deliver to CBJ pretty much monthly, and certainly it's in our quarterly report, a report called, it's from CoStar, and it is a hotel occupancy report. Hotel occupancy has dropped over the last several years, continues to drop. Average daily rate has remained stable over the last 5 years. And as everyone in this room knows, those rates have been high. They've been high across the state. They're high all over the US, but I think it's exacerbated here in Alaska. That said, the hotels are in a precarious position because they have staffing issues just like everyone else does. So I think they're having to work that revenue game of how many rooms do we actually have available, and what is it going to, what's going to take to turn those rooms over. So at this point, I believe we've hit a spot where occupancy and daily rate are starting to kind of balance out. Rates are beginning to drop, so I'm hoping that we can actually increase occupancy as they drop those rates and we're able to get more people in. Travel Juneau is also working with the hotels with the understanding that, especially downtown, many of the hotels have a lot of their rooms contracted out during the summer for cruise shift changes. So that is for cruise entertainment, for example, and for our small ship turnovers. So folks who are coming in to take an uncruise or American Dream, that they stay overnight on one end or the other or both of those. So those contracts impact our ability to, for example, bring in a 200-person meeting in the summertime. We may not be able to get the rooms for that. Sure, so I just did.
Through the chair, I'm not sure about procedure. Okay. I did also want to add to that. It's always a challenge, right, when you're marketing, not sales, right? And I think that Liz does a really good job trying to track numbers and trends and things like that. But as a marketing person, I go to a lot of trade shows. I'm down south a lot promoting my business. And through that, I hear what people are hearing about Juneau. And it just like gives me chills about how important Travel Juneau is, because what's leading on the news right now, and I just came back from a trade show in New York City, and I lost track of how many people came up to me and said, Juneau, oh, I thought you don't want people anymore. That's what we're hearing. And so it is so important that we don't rely on regular news. We don't rely on cruise ships, Holland America, whoever, to tell the world about Juneau. We need to be the ones telling people about Juneau. So that's a big sort of upstream battle that we're swimming against right now. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for joining us and, giving us all this wonderful information and working hard for the community. I am curious. I know that both Assembly Member Smith and Hughes Kanges here were talking about the tracking metrics. And I don't know if this would be something that's part of what you're looking at having that AI get into, but is there any metrics or kind of bracketry for seeing how many of those media hits and engagements are translating into a booking or a purchase of any kind that relates to the community?
Thank you for that. Through the chair to Mr. Brooks. If I had an answer for that question, if I had a calculation that would work, I would be retired and living in a big house in Bermuda, because that is the question that every destination marketing organization tries to get answered. And the way that, of course, marketing actually works is that it's a rather regular touch to the inbound visitor? How many times did they see an ad? How many times did, were they, did they see something come across on social, for example? What is word of mouth? All of those things compounded are what drive people to make the decision. So our job is to put out as much positive and, and great imagery, be realistic about it. I mean, one of the things that this organization has come under fire for is that we have been printing too many sunshiny pictures. So purposely, and we say that, that was false advertising and it rained every day I was here. So we have by design switched to moodier images in almost everything that we're doing. Yeah, the sunshiny stuff is still in there, but we are purposely making sure that people get a realistic view of what it's like to be here. So, so to that end, it's our job to make sure that everybody who is looking at Juneau for whatever reason, whether they want to visit here or they want to move or maybe come in and do some remote working, they have the correct image and they have the correct Juneau story.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is all great information. Thank you for this. And I found the chair wall directed me to my hotel. It feels like there's so many aspects of the work you do that we could dig into as an assembly just for other policy reasons. But since we are in the finance committee, I'll transition to the more of a bummer line of questioning that we've been having with all of our partner agencies. So obviously, you're both well aware that that's been kind of the tone and tenor of the assembly, probably as we've talked about cuts. You have your two side by side, the budget years there and just your fiscal, I lost my page, but I'm hoping you could start off by just talking about, maybe before I get into more specifics, you just had your retreat. How, if you could both characterize how at this present moment you are approaching that as an organization and an agency and what the board is thinking about without getting any numbers from the assembly.
If through the chair and to Ms. Hughes Candies, if I understand the question correctly, what is the board's position with the understanding that that this is going to be a very difficult year?
I'll distill it.
Okay.
I didn't get much sleep last night. If I could hear from you what work you've done already without getting further detailed direction from the assembly, and then if Ms. Hutchinson, I'd love to hear characterization of what that conversation was like at the board level.
Thank you. Again, through the chair to Ms. Hughes Candies, we were advised back in October that we would be held to a flat budget again this year. So we have had 3 fiscal years with the same grant amount of hotel bed tax. And that is the $1.267 million that you see for previous fiscal. And to make that number work, we have X'd out some contracts. We have also X'd out a number of initiatives to stay in there. I believe in, Ms. Hutchinson can attest to this. The board at the retreat wants to be in a position where we are preserving staff as much as possible, but continuing to get the work done. So we will make, we'll make the cuts that would be, necessary to make that happen. We have a small staff. It's have one person who does work remotely, but they are all professionals of what they do. And it's not a job that can be done by 1 or 2 people and be effective. So I think effectiveness is what we need to think about here. And I will reference some case studies that ATIA has used and that I have used in the past of what happens when marketing is reduced significantly or cut altogether, and that is you lose market share very quickly, usually within a year, year and a half for a DMO. Once funding is restored, if it's restored, it takes almost a market cycle to regain the market share. So I don't believe Juneau is in a position where we want to be behind the 8 ball. And as Ms. Hutchinson said, bad news travels fast. So if we're not welcoming people into town, if we don't have the ability to do that in an effective way, people will stop coming. We'll stop getting inquiries from meeting planners, inquiries from inbound visitors, because they will not feel like they are welcome in town. And that happened in Colorado. It happened in Sonoma. Sonoma completely cut their budget several years ago. And then their partners, their businesses started complaining, said, where is everybody? Well, they were overcrowded at one point, and then suddenly there was no one. And they finally restored funding, and it took them 2 to 3 years minimum to get their folks back coming in through the Sonoma Valley. So I will leave it there. We have made cuts in contracts. We have made cuts in our other programming that you should be able to see reflected on budget itself for this year.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on that note, just so you know, we're going to be asking this of everybody. Would you give staff a budget that has a cut of 30% when you get a chance to come up with a budget that cuts 30%? I'm not asking it for now. I know what your answers are now. I want to see where it shows up in your spreadsheet.
Through the chair to Mayor Weldon, a 30% cut, and I would also ask for clarification from Ms. Flick, the finance director. I was advised when we met with the deputy city manager that there was an opportunity perhaps to use marine passenger fees as opposed to hotel bed tax for a chunk. I received an email that was no longer the case. So my question is 30% of what number?
30% of the number you get from us, not including the marine passenger fees,
Okay,
because those are more of a pass-through for you guys.
30% of that number would,
I'm not asking for it now. I want you to go through and figure out where you'd have to cut, like probably a program is
Yeah.
what I'm looking for.
that would represent almost a whole department.
I understand that. I just wanted to see what you guys came up with. And like I said, nothing against Travel Juneau. You're doing great, but we're going to be asking hard questions of everybody.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the expenditure list, can you just give a brief description of what the partner expenditure is, please?
Through the chair to Mr. Brooks, Partnership Services is a self-funded department. So anything that is an expenditure under there is all earned income. There is no hotel bed tax assigned to that department. So those expenditures are directed to partner education. They are directed to getting partners in. So, partner recognition. We do host an annual, event for them. But again, this is all earned income. There is no hotel bed tax attached to that department.
I'll jump in with a related question. Maybe you could just walk through those just at a high level, the difference between those 5 expenditure departments. I mean, I know what administration is and you just explained partner, but the other 3 just for us so that we make sure we understand.
Thank you for that, Chair Wall. EGS stands for Event and Group Sales. So this is the person that is currently staffed by Heather Collins, who is a longtime Juneauite. This department brings in events, meetings, groups, handles the services for those. This department provides services like getting catering bids, getting hotel bids, putting bid packages together for organizations. We regularly bid on meetings with organizations. We may be one of, say, 3 or 4 communities who are bidding on something. So that's part of that process as well. So that is a sales job, and that ROI is reflected in the economic impact that we bring in for those meetings. So when I mentioned earlier, for example, that we have brought in meetings with a $3.5 million economic impact, that's just for this year for that department. DM stands for Destination Marketing, so that is exactly what it stands for. Christy Switzer heads that department. She attends trade shows. She talks to media. She arranges for media fans, familiarization tours, if you will. She hosts media in town. She helps tell the Juneau story. She works with partners like Ms. Hutchinson to get them out on excursions so that they can experience the same things that their readers are going to experience. We have food writers in. You may remember that TV chef Patty Ginich from Patty's Mexican Table was here last May as part of her TV tour and new book tour. So we worked with her production company to get her in to do the Juneau section of that series. And that is the type of work that Destination Marketing does, is, they will bring in TV shows, videographers, just travel writers, travel agents. Training travel agents is a huge thing. That isn't, we thought 3 or 4 years ago that travel agents were just going to go by the wayside because of, Expedia and the internet and all of that. And actually people are taking them up because they love having a real person to talk to who knows what it's like, to be in that community. VIS is Visitor Information Services. This historically has been funded partly through hotel bed tax and marine passenger fees. Their job is to ensure that the visitor sites are staffed, open, ready to go, full of information, full of correct information. They handle all of the inbound inquiries, whether by email or by phone, making sure that guides get sent out, that, people have what they need. They may call and request additional information. Hey, send me some stuff on whale watching too. All of those pieces. So they can answer 150 questions a day or so. It's a very, very busy department during the summertime. PS is Partnership Services, which I just described. That is dedicated to our partners and services that they need for their accounts and so on. And then there's admin, which is, primarily myself and our operations manager, and we're a little bit of the glue that kind of holds the whole thing together.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the, have the savings accounts been growing over the last couple of years?
Through the chair to Mr. Brooks, yes, that we have 2 savings accounts that you should be aware of, that they are on the summary sheet. For our finances, we have a savings account over at First National, and we have a savings account at Wells Fargo that is associated with our checking account. They have grown through earned income, and the other thing this group should be aware of is that there are unspent marine passenger fees associated with the crossing guard program inside of that. Close to, I think we calculated about $515,000 that has grown since post-COVID. So since the previous vendor had difficulty delivering that service and then didn't bill all of that out, we were double checking all of that. That reserve has grown. For this fiscal year, Travel Juneau did not receive marine passenger fees toward that program. So we are drawing down from this reserve to pay for the crossing guard program from July 1st forward. So that is our goal, is to get that spent down and use those reserve for the crossing guard program. The other, the remainder of that is the rest of our earned income plus the hotel bed tax grant that we receive from the city as that builds up. Historically, we spend most of our budget the last quarter and a half of the fiscal as we have the run up to the season. That's when we have our big trainings. That is when we do a lot of trade shows. And we just naturally expend more of our revenue in springtime than we do in the fall.
Mayor Weldon?
Thank you. Looking at the page, page 4 of your thing, looking at the tiers, how much does it cost to be part of each tier?
I'm sorry, through the chair to Mayor Weldon, I do not have that particular sheet in front of me. Base tier to belong to Travel Juneau is $400. That is our tier 4. And that will include, listing on the website. It includes a listing in the planner. And then the other services that Travel Juneau provides. We have tiers above that that include items like ads in the planner. I believe that one is about $1,500 to $1,800. There is a tier 2, which is in the $3,700 range. Each tier, of course, has additional benefits that line up with that. A lot of that is the ad in the planner. So rather than purchasing all of these items a la carte, as we were doing many years ago, we packaged them up as a tier, so it's one-stop shopping. You sign up for tier 2, and you know exactly what you're going to get and what those benefits are.
Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was, it was helpful knowing what sorts of things you cut back on, contracts, programming initiatives, et cetera. The destination department is where I would imagine you would find something like trade fairs, and I know that's one way that, especially in the other seasons, you're getting out and having those conversations. So I'm wondering if you also reduced the number, how much I can see a number that it's a smaller number, so I know there's some reduction, but if you could talk a little bit about reductions to travel and what you think the impact of that.
Through the chair to Ms. Hughes Candies, we systematically went through and working with the different department heads, we did reduce the number of trade shows that we're going to. We have reduced the amount that is resourced to those trade shows. We have also reduced print ads. We're not really doing print ads anymore, so that is pretty much out the gate at this point. We are very strategically letting some contracts just expire and cutting out some subscriptions. We're constantly looking for cost savings. So the big cuts would come from the 2 primary marketing departments, so event group sales and destination marketing, and I would work with both of those managers to identify the items, and it'd be a mix of things, because we know if we get rid of all the trade shows, that will be huge missed opportunities. We can't get rid of all of one thing, basically. So it's going to be the shuffle of finding those cost savings across the board, knowing that we're going to have to eliminate some things.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that you're saying that the print has kind of gone out the door, but as far as, visitor information and in that realm, kind of, you're talking about it a little bit earlier with, changing the scheme of the visuals to reflect what people are to expect a lot more. And you wouldn't necessarily have to state anything, false, but as far as the spirit of planting a seed, has there ever been any mention of things like, why it's a good idea to move to Juneau in any of that kind of outreach, and trying to just, plant a little inception seed of hey, maybe consider it, because people get in that, in that feeling when they come and visit, they're enchanted by the place. And those seeds can take root a little quicker in that environment.
I think one of our best recruiting tools is our seasonal staff. And that's where we've seen every year we have seasonal staff that decide not to be seasonal. And again, referencing my travel on the road with trade shows, once Travel Juneau cut out their trade shows, I also additionally joined Visit Anchorage, and even Ketchikan has invited me along for some shows. And all of us in tourism, we all came up here for seasonal, and we all live here now. And as a company that houses a lot of my staff, about 50% of my staff are housed in our employee housing. Every year, we've got people staying longer, asking to stay year round in our employee housing, and then eventually making Juneau their residence. So I think that's one of the best recruiting tools as well. And also reaching out to desert communities because they want to see rain. Thank you.
If I may also, to address Mr. Brooks's question, JEDC has a program called Choose Juneau, and we refer folks to Choose Juneau when they have a question about moving to Juneau, working remotely in Juneau, and so we share those resources. They're referenced on both websites. The other piece is that, and this has been borne out by, again, Longwoods in some other research that they have done. They're a big company that does a lot of destination research. There's a halo effect with destination marketing, to the effect that it really, it benefits communities in that people who are looking to move, change locations, again, work remotely, and just kind of want to, start something new. They're looking for a new adventure. The halo effect that destination marketing provides to those people can be a key factor in that decision to move to that destination. This has been borne out in a number of states, including Michigan, with their Pure Michigan campaign. They saw a lot of good feedback from that, and it's no different with Juneau. So I think sharing images, sharing resources among other organizations. We're doing a lot more with video and social because that's where people are. And so we're looking for our markets on those sites specifically. And we have found that Facebook is a great place for people to find events. So we're pushing events on Facebook that are open to the public, and we have our own events page. So all of that wrapped together are ways for people to find out what's going on in town. Would they be having a good time there? They can see that we're having Folk Fest. They can see that we're having, the Jazz Festival is getting ready to happen. They can see when Gallery Walk is. All of that is available on our website, and our website is probably our primary tool, and that's why we need to keep that website up and up to date and very navigable, just for that reason. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Oh, sorry, you had one more question, Ms. Candice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more. That was great. And you just mentioned Ms. Hutchinson talking about the trade shows. So that leads into, I guess, a thought exercise. You mentioned Colorado and Sonoma and what they saw. And I'm sure that if you were a seasonal or a tourist industry business in Sonoma or Colorado, you had big feelings about wherever it was actually fully cut. In looking at these tiers and looking at the actuals of partners and the goals for acquiring new partners, do you feel like you know what the universe of possibility is for Juneau? Like, just if the city was to stop providing funding, I guess, do you feel like this accurately reflects how many you think are out there or how that might influence behavior? Because I can imagine if you're a tourism business and you're going to say, well, we still need you to exist, even if the city is not going to fund you. Do you think that would expand your universe?
Through the chair to Ms. Hughes Candies. In the, and I believe we're talking about the universe of inbound traffic?
Of potential partners.
Oh, potential
Who else
partners.
could, you know,
Oh.
what that universe looks like?
Well, I'm happy to say that several years ago, under a different city manager, we agreed to represent every business that wanted to be represented on the Travel Juneau website, whether they are paid or not. Unpaid partners are called non-partners, but they still get a contact listing. So if you would want to go, search for, and we're adding to this all the time, and partners who, for whatever reason, maybe one year they can't pay to be a partner, we still keep them on in the system as a non-partner so that they will register on the website. So maybe, Aunt Minnie from Birmingham visited this company when she was here 5 years ago, and maybe that company just wasn't able to join Travel Juneau. She could still go to the website and find them because they're still in our system. And that way, we have just a ready prospect list for partnership as well. Our partnership services manager, Tammy Hansen, is always scoping out new possibilities. She's got, a great prospect list. And this is one avenue for her to expand that list. We feel that philosophically, every business in Juneau is actually part of the visitor industry because by rating, just that level of spending, everybody gets a little, gets a piece of it, whether you're a plumber or you're doing wiring or whatever it is that you're doing. So also philosophically, every business that is inside the visitor industry should become a member of Travel Juneau one way or another so that we can let our visitors know everything that is available to them here in town.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you both for being here. I know those aren't easy questions. We don't like having to ask them, and that's where we're at right now. So really appreciate the time, and we'll probably follow up with more questions. Thank you for being here. Oh, Ms. Hutchinson, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
I'm learning these procedures, so I appreciate it through the chair. I would like to, if I may close as a representative of the board, I have so much respect and sympathy for the painful cuts that we're all having to do and really appreciate the time the mayor has given us to keep us updated and regular communication with us. But once again, from a marketing perspective, I know many of you are also business people, and I would just plead that at a time when the budget is so precarious is the last time, the time that we don't want to make huge cuts on an industry that is thriving in Juneau. And we have many things in the tourism industry right now that are leveling us off. Many of us businesses have seen flat lines over the last 3 years, still profitable, still great, but those booming years are gone. So there's a lot of management going on right now. But I would just plead that at a time when Juneau needs the influx, we need the thriving businesses right now, that I hope that we would take good care of our tourism industry.
Thank you for that. All right, Ms. Gilbred, we will bring you up for our next presentation here on the Juneau Community Foundation. There you go.
When you sit there, you get to know the hard question first. I'm not going to answer it first. Just a quick overview. I think Adrian's going to put up the spreadsheet that you have in your packet. I don't have any slides per se, but the spreadsheet sort of gives you information about how much has gone out from the Juneau Community Foundation and our Juneau Hope Endowment Fund and the City and Borough of Juneau. In addition to that, we give out probably $400,000 more that go to serve social services. So I'm going to back up and start at the beginning here. 2020, FY '26 was our 10th year of combining the Juneau Hope Endowment with the CBJ Social Service Grant Program into one program. Over the years, we've given out $22.6 million, which is pretty impressive, with about 11.8 million of that being from the city and 10.7 from the Juneau Community Foundation. We've given it out over the years to 46 different organizations, some of which are still with us and some of which have come and gone. So we have a process every year that began with the first year we started giving out the funds before we were even connected with the funding from the city. And that was to go out to all the organizations in the social service and health areas that we give out funds and bring them together under the different areas where we give out funds, including homelessness, mental health, suicide prevention, substance misuse, hospice, domestic victims of violence. And then when we joined with CBJ, we added education in there, adult education. Through that process, we identify what the gaps are and what the needs are in our community for funding for social services. Our process includes a letter of interest. We have a professional advisory committee that is made up primarily at this point of other funders. So people who represent the Rasmussen Foundation, the Alaska Mental Health Trust, the Sudak Foundation, the Alaska Community Foundation, so several other foundations. We find that doing that helps in a number of ways. They have experience in giving out grants and in reviewing applications, and so they raise good questions that we are able to get back to our grantees and have them provide answers to after they reviewed the letters of interest. They get to know Juneau's needs, and we're able to leverage more funds from them to support the needs in Juneau. So then after the PAC reviews the letters of interest, we discuss the what their questions are that they'd like to see answered in the application, and we tell nonprofits where they stand, how much money is being requested, and how much money we think that we will have. We know what we have right now from the Juneau Community Foundation because we figured that out based on December 31st of the year before. We don't know what the city has until usually May, sometimes October. Then we just let those nonprofits and other applicants know if it's unlikely that we'll be able to meet their request this in a particular year, just so that they can decide whether to write a grant application or not. They're always welcome to write one, but you just want to be able to let people know where to spend their time and what might be most fruitful. We have the Listen and Learns. Those are coming up actually later this month, and there's 6 of them scheduled and covering all those different areas. We tend to get anywhere from 5 people for hospice to 35 people for homelessness, mental health, substance misuse, things like that at any one of those. Applications are due in March, and then our advisory committee reviews those applications, and with their input, we figure out funding levels, and the grants are approved by my board. And then let's see, then the grants are awarded once we have funds from the city and borough of Juneau in addition to our funds, and then we give them out. So usually they're going out end of July, early August, something like that. We also have a reporting process because we really look at information to ascertain a couple of things. Our reports are an interim report and a final report for each awardee every time there's an award, because some of these are substantial awards of $400,000 to $600,000. And so As with all larger grants, meaning anything from 10,000 or 30,000 and above, having a good reporting process on it is important to us. Then the final reports are due on August 31st of every year. You all are on a fiscal year, we're on a calendar year, so I'm always juggling the year dates. And that's the process that we use. Let me see. In addition, to the HOPE funds, I talked about additional funds that we have. And our additional funds go to things like when you see Feeding Juneau Kids, so they go to the weekend backpack program. They go to activities and trades scholarships, and they go to housing for people who have less than 30% area median income, and for hospice. So we provide funding in a lot of areas. Some of the funding, because this is a combined grant, some of the funding does go to other agencies that are associated with the City and Borough of Juneau, like the school district or the hospital in the past, the fire department, the police department, and others have requested funds, specific funds. And so in front of you, I pulled together a report on the FY26 grants. Those are the grants that we gave out. I guess the second half of them went out end of September, early October this year. No, I guess it must have been October. And you also have a copy of the award notice that we sent out, the press release. And then I pulled together funding, grant funding and outcomes. So those are based on the August 25th final report. So that's for the FY25 grant period. Reason I didn't do FY26 interim reports is those are not due until January 31st, and these packets were due before I had those reports. But what I did was go through and pull out reports for all of the organizations that we provided CBJ funds to this year. And so you'll see in here, the first paragraph on each organization details, how many people they worked with, how many meals they gave out, how many bed nights there were that people stayed in those facilities, or other sort of factual and statistical kind of information about organizations and what they were doing. And then we do ask people to try and provide us with a story of success and someone who came to their agency to receive services and how that went for them and what happened. So there's several of those in there. And I don't know if people have questions about any of these, but I tried to, it personalizes it a little bit more than, all right, there were 200 of these people and 3,000 bed nights and these, and what does that all mean? What it all means is that this is the social service delivery of our community to our community. And in the year 2000, CBJ closed a social service, and it might have been health and social service, but it was definitely social service department at the city, and was giving out a little over 800,000 at that point, where it was going out in grants. And so that grant amount has steadily increased, stayed the same for several years, and then we've asked for increases as everybody has increased needs, especially after salaries and insurance and all the things that increase when you are staff intensive and you can't put robots in the place, is sort of what I'm saying. And so that's the basic picture. I did include our a very summary of our budget to actual, and what our approved budget was for 2026. We use $50,000 a year of this money to support the work that it's basically my program since it started when I was the only staff person at the foundation. And so it supports about half of the expenses of running the program. And so that's in there. And then it's much easier to read that, I think, in your packet, or it's a little easier to read it in your packet, maybe not much. So I don't know, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Questions for Ms. Skilbred? Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being with us here today and giving us all this great information, doing great work in the community too. I had a question on the Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I was just reading the little testimonial there about the program, and it's just unclear to me, has that always been operational for the last handful of years, or is it just getting restarted, or what's the operations going on there?
Yeah, Mr. Brooks, through the chair. They are getting restarted, and this is the third year of their restart. Big Brothers Big Sisters had a Juneau chapter that was active and doing a lot of work here. I think like Mark Wheeler, who was on the assembly, was the head of it for some time, and people were very active. What happens when agencies collapse their administrative to one area, which means everything became Anchorage, Big Brothers Big Sisters, is that those where when you're further away and when you're in Juneau, they lose a lot of connection with the local community. And so even though there were really good advocates for Big Brothers Big Sisters here, when that happened, they saw a real diminishment in the amount of income that they received, the amount of people that knew what they were doing. And so they got, just 3 years ago, I think they got a new executive director. She was looking for $50,000 for a position to be in Juneau, and it was an off year. We try and do, anytime we fund a position, we're looking at funding it for 3 years. And this year right now is the first of 3 years. And they are off by a year because I told her, well, we want to see what you can do. And then we'll okay 50,000 a year for the next 3 years. And this is the third year for them. So I'm hoping to see both from their interim report and from what they do through the end of this year, sort of what happens and how they're doing. They've had a lot of turnover in staff. It's been hard because the office is in Anchorage, I believe. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. So has the program been offered and children participating in it here since 2021?
Oh, yeah. There's been
Okay.
children participating here since it began.
Okay.
It's just they had an office of 5 people here or something, 4 or 5 people. I did some contract for work for them, so knew about it, but that's no longer exists.
Thank you.
Mayor Weldon?
Thank you. So on your page that you talk about your budget, where is your revenue coming from?
Where is our revenue coming from? So our revenue comes from several places. Our revenue comes from fees on the funds that we have. We are grown from being, when I walked in the door, a $1.6 million foundation. We're now a $110 million foundation. So there's some fees on that come through the door. We also have some earnings on other funds. We had a sustainability fund that was started the year before I got there, and we've developed we got a second sustainability fund when we got a very large donation in 2014. We get contributions. All of our board members contribute considerably. At this point, most of them are when they contribute, are contributing more towards different funds of the foundation or different projects that we're putting forward. But all board members contribute. We get contributions from the community as well. We tend not to do any big push for, especially right now, because you can see we're in pretty good shape. And so we tend not to really push for donations to the community foundation and just tell people to donate to nonprofits that they really care about and have been involved with and want to make a difference there. So we gladly accept donations. So I know this goes out in other places than right here, but that's how we look at it is those would be the main areas. Oh, in addition, there's the 50,000 from the city. We have a fund that was established at the Alaska Community Foundation that gives us some money. And every now and then, like this year, we'll go to Rasmussen Foundation and see if we can get a grant to help us with our move to a new space.
Sorry, there's a laptop screen between me and you, Mr. Kelly. So if you are raising your hand, please do it a little higher. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your support for Big Brothers Big Sisters. My wife is a big and gets a lot out of the program, so I appreciate that. I was curious about any criteria that you may have or any trends that your board tends to follow in choosing which projects you're going to support.
I would say that they selecting what we support or where the grant funding goes really grows out of those listen and learns. There is a certain amount of operational money for several of our larger nonprofits here in town, especially those that do not have Medicaid or other ways of supporting that organization. The Navigator program came out of specifically, it comes out of discussions that we have at those meetings where they say, here's a gap. We need something. Can you help pay for a person for these 3 different organizations that can go out and, take a person from here to there to go and get his picture taken or her picture taken and get their birth certificate so that they can get an ID so that they can then get assistance, or things like that, where it's not covered by Medicaid or something else, or not covered by another program that they have. So that's one example. Another example was assistance that we provide for developing nonprofit housing. We don't use this money for that, but that's another big area where we have been putting money recently to develop housing for less than 30% AMI. And that whole Housing First came out of, it had already been talked about a bit, but it really moved forward at one of our first listen and learns where Tlingit Haida Regional Housing said, we'll give you the property at the meeting. And then the whole thing started moving forward. So I think I've got to say it was very interesting the first years when you went to organizations and said, I really want you to tell us what you think is needed. And several says, no, you don't understand, Amy. You decide what the parameters are of the grant and we write the grant application and you tell us who wins. And I said, well, that just doesn't make sense because I don't work in this area. So I need you all to tell us, how that's going and what's needed. And it's resulted, I think, in a very fair way of being able to allocate funds. We've also gotten funds that have come to us subsequently from the city. So some of the big increases have come because they were a line item in the budget. And you all decided, let's just move that in with the community foundation. So I'd say there's over like 600, 700,000 that's come in that way. So some of that big increase has simply been moving it from one line into a different line in your budget. So
I'll jump in with a question. maybe I'll ask the mayor's question a little differently. The hard question. You know, you heard us in our last meeting. We're in a tough place. We're looking at everything line by line. And we don't expect people to have answers to this question, but if we were to come back to you with, you know, less money than we have traditionally given you as a partner organization, you know, our theory has always been that that's ongoing, you know, steady revenue, but in our current situation, we may be looking at reductions. What process would you go through, or do you have a sense of how your board would react to that, you know, to approach that?
It isn't quite my board's sense as much as the organizations which we fund. And I think that's, you know, we are the intermediary who has said, okay, we'll bring $1.5 million to this. And that became new money in, you know, 2014. And so we'll help support it. And at that time, I thought, oh, we'll be able to do new things because the money the city's putting into it is covering what's actually being done, but that wasn't the case. So I think it would just result in cuts. You know, if it is a 30% cut, that's $500,000, $600,000. And so, you know, what do we cut? You know, and I think that would take a lot of hard conversations. I think we'd lose some organizations perhaps because you're also looking at organizations where it's, we have seen, I think, I don't know the numbers, but a decrease in the number of people who have signed up for Medicaid and other benefits. And so it's uncertain what Medicaid is going, I always mix up Medicaid and Medicare, which is why I'm stumbling. What Medicaid reductions in our state will have an effect on those who actually have earned income. So that's one thing. We don't know what's going to happen with the continuum of care funding and other federal funding for housing people who are homeless and others. So that's another one. So I think that it will be a snowball effect if we have to decrease the amount of funding that the community is putting towards resources that really build resiliency and help those folks who are most in need in our community. You know, what do we take out? Do we take out, you know, helping to support an additional time at the Teen Health Center for mental health? They just lost 3 mental health providers at in the school district, not just, but at the end of last year. All of these things will have an effect on youth through people who are, you know, been homeless for years and now have housing somewhere. So I can't really tell you. I just know it would be, you know, we came in last year and asked for $500,000 more. And thankfully the Assembly gave us $250,000 for the year. So that's going away. You know, we have agreed not to ask for that unless, you know, we have agreed to take what we had last year that was continuing. I'm not a sole voice here. I've got 30 agencies behind me, and what do they say? I am looking at about, I think it was about 400,000 more in letters of interest requests than there's funding for. So, you know, yeah, more than hard conversations, I think we'll lose organizations for sure.
Thanks for that. Mr. Brooks, then Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is like a kind of 2-part question, but do you know how much you guys have in savings? And if so, how much interest gets collected on that savings annually, if any?
Yeah, we have reserves, the Community Foundation. Yeah, we have reserves, and that's the interest on that is some of what was what's part of our income. I don't know exactly how much, uh, um, we figured I'll just tell you what I do know. We determine our reserves based on a 25% drop in the market because so much of our funds are dependent on what the market's doing. They're invested in endowments or in long-term institutional investments. And so they're in the stock market and the bond market. And if there's a 25% drop in the market, we look at how long, we do a 5-year coming back within 5 years. And so we have reserves that will help us through that, won't cover everything. And I think that's about 600,000.
And that's the total savings and investments that holding assets that aren't being used.
Well, we have $110 million. That isn't accessible to us to take that to operate. And so what I'm talking about here isn't our reserves and isn't our funds. It's we manage a grant system for CBJ and ourselves and have combined it. And so that's what we're doing here. And being able to determine, it just takes our time. But really what we do is we look at what's the fiscal health of the organizations that we're giving funds to. So I don't know if that helps.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, Ms. Wall probably asked my hard question a little differently, but 250,000 is halfway to 500,000. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I asked the same out of travel, but realistically, when we ask the public what things they're going to cut, social grants may be on the chopping block. I say may, but that's not my question. My question is looking at your Alaska AIDS Assistance Association. I think I've talked to you about this before, but they gave out 107,000 sterile syringes and only got back 23. Is there any way we can put it more of a exchange rather than just handing out syringes, as we seem to have a huge syringe problem in the city?
They have been working on that. I know that. And I know that their own staff goes out and helps collect some of those. I think what I hear when I ask about them, like, can you do a 1-for-1? Well, you bring one back and you get a new one. The results of that is a lot of people sharing needles and getting diseases and infections. And so that isn't the way that they're doing it, but I understand the problem. It's a problem, especially out towards Teal Street Center, but all over town, I would imagine. So, yeah. If you have a suggestion, I'm open. So.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is kind of tailing on to what the mayor was just saying. Do you know if the search clinic down from Teal Street is also providing clean syringes for folks?
I'm looking to you, Chair, the chair who works for search. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I would imagine that they do provide clean syringes.
All right,
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah. Yeah. Right, right. I'm going to test my knowledge of 30 different organizations, which is, it's pretty good, but it's not everything.
All right, seeing no more questions, Ms. Gilbert, thank you so much for being here. Again, we may have more questions for you as we go through this. We really appreciate your time.
Great. Well, thank you all for doing this.
And I will, I'm going to give us a 10-minute recess. In 10 minutes, we'll come back and hear from the Small Business Development Center. We'll bring the Assembly Finance Committee meeting back to order. We are going to be hearing from the Small Business Development Center. Thank you, Ms. Hussein, for being here. I'll turn it over to you, and sounds like you got some slides, and we will ask you some questions after the fact. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Weldon, City Manager, and members of the Assembly. My name is Sandy Hussein. I'm a resident of Juneau, and I am the full-time local Juneau Center Director for the Alaska SBDC. I am honored to present to you tonight about the Juneau Center, and because we're limited in time, I will keep my points high level so that we can dive deeper into your questions at the end. I prepared 29 slides. I promise you I will not bore you with 29 slides, and you'll probably hear me say next slide, skip over a lot of information just because we're limited in time. I also apologize because I've written down my notes mostly because of the time constraints. I didn't want to ramble on and waste your time. I wanted to be cognizant of our time here. The Alaska SBDC will celebrate its 40th year this year, and the Juneau Center was one of the first centers to be established with the Alaska SBDC. A little history about the SBDC, and I promise you this is not futile. It is about funding. In the late 1970s, the Small Business Development Center, or the SBDC, was created by the SBA to strengthen local economies by helping small businesses. The SBA designed the SBDC model as a partnership, a cooperative partnership between federal, local, and state. So the SBA does not fully fund SBDC centers on its own nationally. There are over 1,000 centers nationally. Federal funding is designed to work with the state and local investment. And that local participation is what allows a full-time community-based center like the Juneau Center to exist. This model is important for a few reasons. It links federal, state, and local government funds towards one goal, supporting small businesses. It allows Juneau and CBJ to have buy-in to support their small business community and gives the federal government a reason to invest further in Juneau's community because they know that cooperation exists. It's almost like when Uncle Sam decided to create the SBDCs, it wanted some local oversight. It knew it couldn't manage 1,000 centers on its own, so it decided to get buy-in locally. That's why this model exists, and that's why it works. Notably, the Juneau Center is not a standalone nonprofit. We're not like the other nonprofits that presented here today. We are federally accredited, and as such, we're held to rigorous guidelines, sometimes so much so they drive me crazy during the day. What this means is that the Juneau Center is part of a model that is proven and tested year after year across thousands of centers in the US and for decades. Next slide. I won't bore you with this. It's all of the things that we do are on our website. Next slide. Next slide. And next slide. Okay, so I want to get straight to the data. There are a lot of things, a lot of programs, a lot of services that the SBDC offers, and the Juneau Center rides along with the Alaska SBDC. But at the core of the Juneau Center is one-to-one business advising. It's the core of the SBD services that we present here at the Juneau Center. It is absolutely free to business owners, and it is confidential. We cannot share the business information with other businesses or with the government. We do, however, collect a lot of anonymized data, a lot of data. And this chart represents some of the data that we collected last year. This shows some of the topics that I consulted on heavily in 2025. And there are a few things that we can glean from this chart. The data shows that Juneau businesses struggle with financing, planning, and managing growth, and they seek support in these top 3 areas. Number 2, this is a broad range of topics, guys. This isn't just like, hey, I need a business plan. Hey, I need a financial model. It's pretty much running the gamut across all functional areas of business planning. And what does this mean? What do I see anecdotally? Typically, the majority of business owners either don't have the ability to upskill in every single area to manage their business. And that's where the SBDC can provide that additional support and guidance necessary to get over their hurdles. A quick story, you see a lot of businesses in Juneau, in Alaska, that come in. Let's say it's a dude, he has a big white truck and he does roofing, he does decking, he does flooring, he does sheet rocking. He's a jack of all trades. His wife does the bookkeeping and the secretary and managing of invoices and all of those things. And even with this double power couple, they still need support in what they're doing. There are still areas of need. I see this time and time again. Last, with regard to having local presence, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see capital and finance. I can touch upon all the, the financial models that I've done to get millions of dollars of funding in conventional loans or SBA loans, but I won't talk about that. What I'll talk about here under capital and finance is the topic around tax planning. There was something pretty interesting that I found last year during my first year of advising Juneau businesses. And that is that almost all of the businesses had confusion around CBJ sales tax. Whether they were starting a business or in business or behind on their taxes, they didn't know what to do. While it's clear on the CBJ website, or if you email the sales tax office, there's a lot of fear when it comes to talking to the tax guy, whether it's the IRS or CBJ. And so what became clear to me was that I had to address this issue front on right away with all the business that I advise. I say this not because I want credit from you guys, because you're CBJ and I'm here pounding the pavement to collect tax dollars for you. I say this because this was a nuanced observation that I was able to have about local businesses that had I been in Anchorage, had I been in Matsu, had I been in Fairbanks, I would not have been able to determine that and see this pattern across every single business that I talked to during the, all the hours that I'll talk about. Next slide. This is some of the top industries. The most important thing here is if you look at the top three, it really reflects Juneau. But I also want to say that those top three, they really slide. You can see 2 or 3 businesses come in and say, remember when like the food truck court was opening up, you can see that it changed. So there's a lot of fluctuation here, but it still is reflective of Juneau businesses. Next slide. Okay, this is a chart that shows our budget. And I have to say, embarrassingly, that salary and benefit number is not reflective of what I get paid, but it is reflective of taxes and all the things that go into salary and benefits. As I mentioned earlier, the Juneau Center is funded through cooperative agreements with SBA, with the key requirement being non-federal matching funds to accompany the federal funds. In this case, CBJ funds $28,500 for the center, and these funds are strictly used to help close the funding gap with regard to salary and benefits. The state also steps in and provides the funding necessary for all other costs, including office space, internet, and Wi-Fi. Next slide. Okay. This is a really important slide, and it's probably one of the most important slides I will show tonight, aside from the impact slide. If you look at this pie chart, you'll see here the distribution of funding that comes from these 3 sources. If you look at the yellow piece of the pie highlighted in red, you'll see the CBJ's portion, 18%. This slide is extremely important because the CBJ investment is catalytic. It is not duplicative and it is not additional. What does this mean? In other words, the 18% that you see here anchors the federal and state dollars to Juneau. Without that CBJ investment, you do not get the federal and the state funding of 130,000. Next slide. So in other words, CBJ's support, for every $1 CBJ invests, it leverages roughly $4 in federal and state funding to ensure that the Juneau Center stays open. It's how we maintain a full-time locally based staff person, which allows us to ensure those federal and state dollars stay focused on Juneau small businesses rather than being diluted statewide. That's really important right there. Okay, next slide. I'm not going to go into all of these slides because I know that we're limited in time, but if you look at slide 11 through slide 19, you will see a lot of the additional statewide and national resources that are leveraged by the Juneau SBDC Center. And actually, will you do me a favor and go to slide 14, because that one is important. But slide 11 through slide 19, you'll see a lot of the resources programs. This doesn't even do it justice, to be quite honest. The important part to recognize about this is these resources, these programs are able to be interpreted, disseminated, distributed to Juneau businesses that seek guidance or that seek resources. Otherwise, they would probably lay stagnant with someone in Matsu, in Fairbanks, etc., because they might not be getting the attention that they need. And the last thing that I want to say about the slides for these additional resources, we are not funding them locally. So these are statewide resources. These are national resources. These are things, you know, market research reports, programs, tools, sometimes that cost businesses $3,000 a pop. They get them for free and they're funded by the state. And we're able to access them through the Juneau Center and provide them directly to Juneau businesses. Okay, I want to skip straight to slide 20 and because I want to focus on impact. Okay, so here we are, impact. The SBDC core funding is awarded through a competitive cooperative agreement. It's not entitlement. So SBA evaluates the Juneau Center on a few key factors: financial stability of the program, strength of partnerships, including local partnerships like that with CBJ, ability to meet match requirements, and capacity to deliver services consistently. Next slide. Here you will see the impact of the CBJ investment. When viewing these numbers, please keep in mind, we are audited and go through multiple desk reviews every year, both from SBA and the University of Alaska. The numbers you see here are reported by clients. We have to obtain both attribution and affirmation from clients who see success from our services. So in 2025, this is what the numbers tell us. Overall, we served 114 small businesses, of which 70 were new. We expect that number to increase in 2026. We topped out at 891 advising hours, and we are tracking to top this record in 2026 as well. Even with Snowmageddon, today on February 24th, less than a month in, we are at 137 advising hours in 2026. In 2025, we helped raise $2.6 million in funding, including grants, equity, and business loans. And as I mentioned earlier, we are likely, sorry, I missed that slide and I should have mentioned it. But we are likely at 1.5 million in 2026 with less than a month in. And we supported 142 jobs. This would not have been possible without CBJ local investment. The part that I did miss was SSBCI. It's actually a pretty important component of the SBDC. The local funding doesn't support it. It's an incredible program. If you go to slide 14 quickly, Adrian, I'll just touch upon it very quickly because it's one of those things that, number one, is very complex. Number two, it's one of those things that people don't know about. But essentially, the Alaska SBDC is the only organization in the country managing both state and a tribal SSBCI program. My layman terms interpretation of SSBCI is think of it as with, FHA mortgage loans, treasury-backed loans that support riskier lending to underdeserved communities or smaller, homeowners. This is the equivalent for small businesses. And the SBDC is one of the only SBDCs in the country to manage both tranches. And this morning I got word that a very well-known company that I'm sure you guys know of that has been seeking capital to keep itself alive was able to get sign off on SSBCI funding through the Alaska SBDC here in Juneau.
Ms. Hussein, I'll have to ask you to wrap it up here.
Okay, great. Sorry. Okay, I will stop here. But there are several success stories in the deck along with testimonials. As you review them, I'd like to impart one thing. Impact takes time and builds year over year, and continued local funding ensures progress is not reset each year. You'll see in some of the success stories in the next few slides that these businesses took time to get to where they are, and others are just getting started. And the advisory work that the Juneau Center provides in partnership with CBJ, the SBA, the state of Alaska, and UAA will be there to assist through each phase of the business. I sincerely thank you for your time this evening, and I look forward to answering your questions. Sorry, I had to speed through that.
Mayor Weldon and Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, and thank you for presenting today and advising all of our local businesses, or a bunch of our local businesses. Do your clients have to pay anything is my first question, and then do you track how long they stay in business? Got two in there, sorry, Madam
Yeah.
Chair.
So first question, they don't have to pay anything. Every once in a while, there are workshops offered where there's a small fee required. I have successfully, for all the workshops that I've offered, been able to leverage sponsorships from lending partners like KeyBank and Hayaku here in Juneau. So I've been able to find sources of funding to make sure everything is free. And in terms of the longevity of businesses, I think that there is some data with regards to that. I don't exactly know how it's collected and where it's stored, but I believe that I've seen some data with regard to that. I hope that I'm not wrong, but I'll put a star next to there. Not certain, but I think that there is.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. You've mentioned that this is a statewide program that receives some federal support. And you mentioned that some of the benefit to having you here in Juneau is that we receive more personalized attention in our community. I'm curious for other communities in Alaska, it probably draws on support from people in Anchorage, Fairbanks. I'm wondering, does that also draw on support here? Do you spend some of the time helping other businesses that aren't in Juneau? And if so, would you have an estimate of how much?
My time is dedicated to Juneau businesses. There are 2 businesses outside of Juneau that have requested to specifically work with me because of my background. One is in Yakutat and another one is in Anchorage. And I very rarely advise them. It's been limited to 1 or 2 meetings here or there. But the purpose of me being here is to drive the Juneau Center and to be dedicated to Juneau.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks for this. This great slides. My question is about the partnership, this federal, state, local partnership, and that 18% catalytic piece. Is there a minimum amount? I see the, $1 to $4, and you can always like
Right,
figure out
right.
what you're leveraging. But is there a minimum amount that CBJ needs to contribute, or it would lose disproportionate amount in state or federal support?
So it's not an answer that I have or that I know, partly because our budget and funding is essentially established by UAA, from my understanding. I do know that the 28,500 is the amount that we have always requested, and we've never increased that amount. So I honestly don't know the answer to that, and I apologize.
It's okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here with us and giving us all this valuable information. And as being a business owner in town, I really appreciate you helping all these other business owners and entrepreneurs. I am curious about that match. Is the match only associated with funds that come from the municipality, or is the match granted to just any funds that are privately raised?
It's a good question. It gets more complex outside of CBJ. So we are not your typical 501c3. The way we raise funds is very different. We don't roll over funds. For instance, I can preemptively answer your question about savings. That's not an option. Also, once you start going beyond the city government, essentially UAA steps in, and then it becomes a different animal that I'm not privy to. Oh, let me just say one other thing. On top of that, it also would mean that the dedicated service to Juneau businesses may be protracted.
All right, seeing no other questions, thank you so much for being here and teaching us a little bit more about what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, that brings us to agenda topic 3. Gasno Human Services Assembly Grant Update. Who is this? Manager Kester.
Thank you. If you recall, in 2024, Gasno Human Services came to you with a request to fund $2 million to support a very good project, 51 permanent supportive housing units. They needed the support of the Assembly at the time because the Assembly dollar needed to be the first dollar to leverage additional funding, and we had to also provide them with some letters of support. They were successful in leveraging federal dollars. However, due to the changing federal landscape for funding, those grants are no longer available to them. So now they have the $2 million CBJ appropriation that's kind of sitting there waiting for the project to get additional grant funding. They still very much are committed to the project. They just see it, instead of a timeline, which was supposed to break ground this summer, as a 5 to 10-year timeline horizon. So what we are requesting from you in this memo is just to have staff work with Gasno Human Services to bring that $2 million back into CBJ, so you can either use it for more RAPE funding needs, put it in your your reserves, what have you. And, let Gastineau Human Services know that they can come before you when they do need that funding and request it again. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Is anyone from Gastineau Human Services available? Okay. Well, if we have questions, I know the mayor and I sat down with them, but I would, encourage others to, if you've got more questions for the project that they can answer, to seek them out. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them. Any questions for our manager on this? Ms. Hughes Gandies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Maybe it's a question for Gastineau Human Services. I'm just wondering how much you got into. It's nice to know they're still committed to the project. It sounds like they're still committed to that size, that many units. It's just going to take them longer rather than downscaling. Okay, great. Thanks.
Mayor Weldon.
Are you ready for my motion? Yeah. And it was a good conversation with them. And then I think Ms. Wall and I both said we support the project. The timeline just is such that other people could make use of that money while we work on getting them more funding through the federal and the state somehow. Anyway, I move to direct staff to work with Gastineau Human Services to return the Assembly's $2 million grant and come back to Finance Committee with a future funding request for the project when they're closer to being developed. And ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections? Ms. Hughes Gandies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Objecting just for one more question, that is a staff question. I don't trust the top of my head. Was this from the general fund or was it from the Affordable Housing Fund that we granted them? I feel like it was general fund, but I don't remember.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Hughes Gandies, we believe it's through the general fund.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Atkinson, do you still have your hand raised?
No, that was mix up on my part. Sorry.
All right. Any objections? Seeing none, that is so moved. We will go on to item 4, FY27 Assembly Grant Process and Deadlines. Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Chair Wall. This is just an informational piece for all of you. In working with Chair Wall on the budget process, we know there are many hard decisions before this body. However, in wanting to preserve process that's available to the Assembly and to community members, we're going to keep the community grants process as a process that the community organizations can avail them of. Basically, the way that works is a community organization has an idea, they need some funding, they need to find an Assembly member who will sponsor their idea. And so if you decide to say, yes, I'm going to sponsor your idea, you let us as staff know, we get you the form that has information about their project and their amount and their request. And we will help you get that back from them. We've created a deadline of March 15th so that we can compile that information and bring it to you on our April 1st AFC meeting, at which time what has typically happened is that sponsoring Assembly member introduces the idea. Assembly members can say, ooh, if I'm going to make a decision on this, here are the questions that I have. We gather those questions and then get that information back for you. So we just wanted to make sure you knew that that was still a thing, that that will go in a long list of decisions that you all have to make this spring, but that the deadline is March 15th. The website is fantastic. So if you want to go to the juneau.org/grants, you'll see this great graphic that's in your packet about how the process works, but there's also a history button. So if you hit the history, you get a beautiful Excel chart of who's gotten grants and how much over a long period of time. So it's a great website to just kind of answer the questions that you might have about the history of who's been funded and how much and when.
Thank you. Questions on that? I'll just add in one piece of commentary, which is that I think one of the places we often get tripped up is, one of the decisions we make when we consider community grants is whether we want to fund that organization if they have operational needs one time or into the future. And so as a reminder, if we said into the future, it will be in the city manager's budget. If we voted one time, it will not unless they get a sponsor again. So just want to make sure people check that list so that if you're expecting to see something and you don't, it's because, it wasn't sponsored or because it was a one-time request. So just make sure if there are things that you're hoping show up, that you double check that you're doing that work. All right. Brings us to item 5, 2026 ballot, 3% temporary sales tax and bond propositions. Is this Ms. Flick?
Yes, thank you, Chair Wall. The purpose of this memo is not to solve all of the world's problems tonight, but to get out in front of you that this coming October, if there is a desire to continue the temporary 3% sales tax, it needs to be on the ballot. The question that we have for you is, in the past, we've allocated that 3% and communicated our voter intent language around 1% going to operations, 1% going to projects, grants, and other services, which is mostly operational, and then 1% going to infrastructure type projects. And so the basic question along these lines is, just validating we want to put that on the October election and to get a sense of really like that allocation, we don't need to talk about it anymore, or we want to talk about that allocation and what's included in that intent language. And you'll see at the very bottom, the last date to introduce an ordinance on the regular schedule for something to be on the October election is June 8th. And the last day for public hearing and action is July 27. So the timing fits in well. And certainly the sales tax is financial. So if there's discussion on wanting to figure out a different allocation, we don't necessarily have to tackle that tonight. I'll work with Ms. Wool to figure out when we can put that on our crowded schedule of budget topics for the spring. And then can I just go to the other one too, or do you want to take them separately?
Let's take them separately just because I already saw some hands. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. And I'm just confirming this. I should know this, but I'm assuming that temporary 3% sales tax for the October 2026 ballot will have to move to the full assembly, correct?
That is correct. It will have to go through the norm. Yeah. You can recommend it as the AFC, then it goes to the full assembly.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I'll start with, I guess I do have a couple of questions, but I'll start with the one that I kind of previewed to you earlier, Ms. Flick. I was kind of curious, because the sales tax exemptions do have an impact on how much each of these 1% will actually fund in the budget. So if we wanted to, for example, hold harmless the 1% for operations, like we wanted to bring in like the same amount of money for 1% of operations, and we wanted to bring in the same amount of money for infrastructure projects, would you be able to tell me how much we'd have to reduce the other option, the 1% for projects, grants, and other services in order to keep that at 3%?
Thank you, Assemblymember Kelly, and through the chair. So in looking at this question, two pieces that I looked at was if we assume that our revenue that comes in for each 1% of sales tax, before there was an exemption on food and utilities, it was about $14 million every 1%. So if we look at reduced sales tax coming in, but we want to still put 14 million towards infrastructure and 14 million towards operations. That would mean that our 3% sales tax would be allocated as 1.2% of the 3% goes to operations. 1.2% of the 3% goes to infrastructure projects. And that would leave 60% or 0.6 of the 3% that would go to those other projects, grants, and other services. And so it'd be about 14 million for the operations and the infrastructure CIP, and it would allow that other projects, grants, and services would drop to about 7 million, taking into account the exemptions with our, as we've frequently talked about it, anticipated revenue loss.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the 3% there, the first percent is for operations. The last one is for infrastructure projects, but then the middle one is projects, grants, and other services, mostly operational. So what are the types of projects and operations covered in that middle one that aren't in the 1% for strictly operations or the 1% for infrastructure projects?
That's a great question, Assemblymember Brooks. It can be, it is intentionally vague, so it can be other capital projects that, so the infrastructure projects are really your roads, drainage, retainage walls, sidewalks, stairs, and we've been doing some utility work in that realm as well. So it could be other capital projects that are high on the priority list of the Assembly, other projects that again are high priority for the city to accomplish. We have in the last round put money towards the restricted budget reserve through that. And then, you know, sometimes there's grant match, sometimes there's just other operational needs that can get addressed through that 1%. So it's just not as prescriptive as the first two groupings.
Thank you. It says in parentheses at the end, mostly operational. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Certainly. So the last couple years, that last 1% has fallen to mostly operational type things, whether it's been, oh, I'm on the spot and I'm not gonna be able to come up with really good examples off the top of my head. Childcare is actually on the 1% temporary sales tax. I'm gonna get you a good list.
It is detailed in the CIP. So the CIP book and the CIP resolution does go through what the different categories are used for, if you want to dig into that a little bit more.
I'm going to jump in with a quick follow-up on that. And in terms of, you know, it's vague here, but in the ballot language, like, do we actually, will the Assembly like provide direction? Like, I don't remember if this is one that we like list out projects, or is this the same language, or it's that we use in the ballot? Can you elaborate?
Thank you, Chair Wall. So the last time, so in 2021, when this was on the ballot, this grouping just listed capital improvements, emergency budget reserve, other general public services.
I have Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. A question to, I guess, both the manager and Ms. Flick. Is the draft FY27 budget that you are currently working on anticipating this 3% being put before voters as is and passing?
The Assemblymember Kelly, the 3% that was approved by the voters in October of 2021 expires June of 2027. So we have a full fiscal year left. FY27 is fully covered by what the voters approved in October of 2021. If we want that to continue starting the first day of FY25, We have to get voter approval this fall for it.
Thank you. And you meant FY 28?
I did mean FY 28. Thank you. Sorry, it's, almost past my bedtime.
I'll ask another question, not seeing some, given, I mean, I think this is a question for Ms. Kester. Given the changes as a result of the election, in order to have kind of maximum flexibility to fund city services, would you recommend, sticking with this ratio or tweaking it? And it's okay if you don't, you don't know exactly how we would do it, but in your opinion, is this worth spending time altering, given we're in an alternate reality or alternate state than we were before?
Thank you for that question. I think that the flexibility in projects in that spending allows us to do what we need to do. The challenge really is in the reduced revenue. So, I mean, you certainly could try to address certain capital projects differently and direct more funds towards operations. But that doesn't really, the question you asked is if you change the allocation of the 3%, would it help you respond more flexibly? And I think we have that flexibility within how it's allocated right now. We still just have a revenue issue that we'll need to address.
I'll get Ms. Huskindis first, then Mayor Weldon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is going to tie back to knowledge that should be firmly rooted in my head that may not be firmly rooted in my head. So when I look at this and I think, yes, do I want to do this again? Yes. Do I want to mess with these allocations? Maybe this is helpful hearing these answers. I feel like right after the election, we in Public Works or in some committee, we asked, what are the things that you can pull out and bond for, just looking at all the different ways we can move the switches on the board. And I'm wondering, with the 1%, with the special 1%, we do the projects and we know what those are. But with this, where we have 1% for those like really roaded ditches, all the things that you named, if you could give me a refresher, I guess, how that fits into that, because that would be one of my first thoughts is, do we put that in, more of that in bonds and use more of this for operations?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Huskindis. So certainly capital projects you could bond for. So when we talk about doing road improvements, the utility work with them, those things that have a long lifespan, we certainly could bond for them. They would be general obligation bonds. So that question would have to go to the voters. It could be for a large amount. But one of the tricks about municipal bonding is that once you issue bonds, you really should expend all of those funds within 3 years. So when we're talking about we'll do easy math because it's later in the evening. If it's $10 million of road work a year, and we go to the voters and say, hey, we want to get $60 million worth of bond approval for the next 6 years, we might have to issue that in a couple of bond issuances, which has a cost to it. But then we would stay clean on like how municipals tax exempt bonds really should be expended. But we would have to go back to the voters to get that authority. And then that comes back to the taxpayers as a debt service mill rate question.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Should this finance committee move forward to introduce this, would the staff's plan to like introduce this at the last possible meeting, or would you like introduce it right now?
Assemblymember Smith, I don't know that the timing matters from a staff perspective. If there's a desire from the body tonight to say, yes, we want the 3% on there and we want you to introduce it on June 8th, we would do that. If you say we want you to introduce it at the next meeting, we would do that. So I think that the timing, we know the latest we can do it. But from a staff perspective, drafting the ordinance, I don't want to speak for the Department of Law and our county or our city attorney, but I would think the drafting of the ordinance would be relatively simple and could be introduced whenever you're ready for it. The question tonight is partially a scheduling question. How much time throughout the budget process do we need to allocate to this particular question?
Mayor Weldon, do you want to get us started with a motion?
Certainly. And the last piece of it, we can decide differently. So I move for staff to draft a ordinance to put the temporary 3% sales tax on the October 2026 ballot using the allocation that's in the memo. And I would move to bring that ordinance back to the Finance Committee so we can discuss those allocations before we move it to the Assembly.
Any objections to that motion? Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it would just be an objection for the purpose of a question. Since we're looking at the grants as being potential areas to reduce spending, should we get a better idea of what we're kind of looking at as a rough idea on that number? And if 1% equals around the 14 million, subtract it from that and see what that gets us instead of the 1% and go with that.
Chair Wall, if I could answer that. The idea was to bring it back to the Finance Committee because I would hope that the staff would provide us with much more detailed information that what's on this memo, and then we can make our decision. These aren't assembly grants and those kind of things. These are a little bit different types of grants, as I believe.
Yeah, Mayor Weldon, often they are the match side of a grant that the city needs to put forth.
Ms. Candies.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I don't think I have an objection for this to come back to committee, and I will work with Ms. Flick offline to kind of sharpen what information that is, because in terms of scheduling, then, I think a little bit, but I need to know more to know. Am I going to try to argue that we should spend, more than a little bit, quarter a bit? So no objection.
I'll remove my objection too.
All right. So we have no objections on that. Seeing none, that is so moved. I'll echo what Ms. Candies just said, that, unless you're wanting us to spend many meetings on it, go do your homework and come back ready to make a decision at that meeting. Or if you think there's a big discussion ahead, let us know so we can plan for that. Okay. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Madam Chair, just a question.
Yep.
Will we expect to see that added to the calendar at some point? Is it already on there that I'm just not seeing the words?
It's not on there because
Okay.
we wanted to figure out how fast track people want it. So we'll try to figure out a time to do it.
Very good, thank you.
Maybe not right away.
Not that you want all the opinions, but seems like a little time would be good, but not maybe waiting until June 8th either, but somewhere between there.
Okay, we'll move on to the second part of the memo, Ms. Flick.
Thank you. So the other outstanding question for this body is regarding bonds that you may or may not want to have on the election ballot in 2026. You may recall we spent a fair amount of time in the last budget process looking at two particular bond groupings, if you will. One resulted in ordinance 2025-33, which was $8 million for water and wastewater utilities. When that came to the full body, a motion was made to postpone it until this cycle. And so we would want to work towards adjudicating what the body wants to do on this budget cycle. The other one that we worked on a bit was just over $10 million of GEO bonds for capital improvement at various schools. And when that came to the full body, it failed to gain approval at all. So those were the two bond questions that were considered last year. And really, again, in the same kind of context of, do you want to just say, we don't want to complicate the ballot. I want to decide today. We don't want to put any bonds forward. Do we want to allocate time within our budget schedule to look at bonds? And if so, is it just revitalizing what was done last year? Or if there's some ideas of, hey, we also want to look at these. It does take a fair amount of time for staff to gather good information to bring back to you if you want to consider other bond packages. So that's the basic question. Like if you know now that you really don't want to put anything on the ballot other than the 3%, then we could make that decision tonight and move on. If you want to put some time on our calendar to make sure we talk about bonds, we'll do that as well.
Questions? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 1% temporary is up when again?
The 1% temporary sales tax needs to be on the October 2027 ballot. So not this October, but the next one.
Thank you.
And that 1% specifically funds capital projects for the most part. So they're one-time in nature, which is a little bit different than the 3% temporary sales tax.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If no one else has one, I guess just more of a, maybe it's not a philosophical question, but other communities do fund more like recurring infrastructure and maintenance through geo bonding, whereas it seems like Juneau, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, we did the wastewater clarifier a couple years ago or whatever. The most part, it seems like we do like big upgrades through our geo bond. I don't know. Maybe my history is off, but like the radios and anyway, I guess like, would you characterize us as typically like doing more like project specific things through geo bonds versus like just we're gonna have a $10 million geo bond per year to do wastewater, streets, water, anyway. And I can get some more history with you too, but anyway, just a thought.
No, I think generally characterizing bonds that CBJ's done, I'm just going to go back to the year 2000 because those are the bond payments that I've seen in the bonds that I've been familiar with. Typically, to your point, they've been, construction of a pool or construction of, something big. But there's also a large, we have had a large number of bonds that were related to school building upgrades. And so that's not necessarily building a new school, but going in and replacing boilers and HVAC and roofs and things like that. As far as other communities, I think there's a mixed bag across the state. So there's not a single right answer of a way to do it. Having the ability to have a regular inflow of funding that we can dedicate to reworking parts of our city road system, I think is a healthy way to do that because we're going to need to work on sections of road every year. And so having that as a recurring funding source that funds specific projects, I think is healthy. If we wanted to move more towards a bonding kind of nature and say, we're going to do 6 years worth of streets and here's our list of streets and put that out to the voters. I don't think that that's a bad way to do it. It's just different from what we've done.
Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now at risk of going into the weeds, and I'll go right back out. based on your last, if we did move towards that, and I agree that what is my feeling as well as how we bond versus sometimes how others bond. If we said this is our 6-year plan of we're doing all these roads and it's Dudley Street and G Street and Long Run and I'm just embarrassing myself here tonight with things I should know. When we do that, we have other funding sources and we're doing transfers all the time because we did Dudley Street and it was a lot cheaper than we thought it would be. With bond proceeds, if we move to that model, what is our flexibility like then? Because you spoke about because they're tax exempt, there's procedures we have to follow.
That's a great question. So in some ways, that flexibility doesn't change. So it's the question that you put out to the voters that govern what you can spend those bond proceeds on. So if you say, we're going to work on roads and the things under the road, so roads and utilities, and here's our plan and other streets that may fit into that. And we say, okay, Dudley Street's going to be $1 million. Oh, it actually is only 800,000. As long as we move those bond proceeds to another project that fits what the voters approved, we have that flexibility.
Great, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I think maybe what I'd like to do is just to go down the line, our favorite activity. I'd love to hear where everyone is on, do you want to consider putting bonds on the ballot? If so, do you want to revisit the ones that we already put together, or do you want to be looking at new ideas? And then we can go from there based on kind of where people are at. I'll start down there, Mayor Weldon.
Pick on me first, sure, why not? I don't know yet. How about that answer? Haven't decided yet.
You
How
haven't
about that
decided yet.
answer?
Okay, that's
I
an answer.
understand both of these bonds are things that we need. I'm worried about putting the 3% and more stuff on the ballot, but as Mr. Smith says, we're gonna deal with the 1% next year. And so if you're worried about the 1% next year, and both of these I would think would be worthwhile projects. So I haven't made up my mind on this one.
Mr. Smith.
You did, because I can now say the same thing. I'm not totally ready to say either way, I guess. I'd probably would need to spend a little more time looking back at water, wastewater rates and those type of increases, and remembering that we still need to put a chunk of funds not from rates into the system. And I can't remember how much and exactly when, but anyway, looking at that and yeah. And I have thought and people have asked me, like, if we do move to a system where we are geo-bonding for potentially, or I'll just call it regular maintenance and upkeep streets and water and things. I think it maybe creates a little headroom in money that we can spend on operations, but we also have bond capacity limits that we have to consider, and we have obviously large or potentially very large things that may be needed to be paid for with bonds, outburst flooding match and that type of stuff. So keeping those things in mind. Obviously all of these things are priorities, but we have a lot of just operational pencil sharpening with the budget. So I don't know yet.
And just for clarity, when you say you don't know yet, are you still considering, this would be helpful, other bonds, not on this, just because that's going to take a lot of time. So that's what I'm trying to get. If it's just, we don't know whether we're going to put these on or not, that's helpful. If it's, we don't know if we're going to put these on or we're going to create new bonds, that feedback would be good if you know it.
I wasn't looking at anything beside these two.
I don't think I am either.
Okay. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I can answer that at this time, I would support the general obligation bonds for the capital improvement projects for the schools. I am undecided. I think I would like to have something that does help with our wastewater and utilities, but maybe I'd be willing to explore changes to that bond. So yes, I am interested in putting at least one bond on the ballot. And I'm interested for sure in the general obligation bond for schools.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Atkinson, are you still with us?
I am, yes. I would say I'm kind of in a similar position to the mayor, where I've been going back and forth on whether I think bonds make good sense this year or if I want to be really cautious with the 3%. I know for certain I don't want to look at anything other than the 2 bond packages we looked at last year. I think those were well thought out, and I would lean more towards the utilities, though I also think, maybe there's some looking at the rates we could do in light of everything that's happened, though that may be a can of worms we don't want to reopen. But regardless, I'm undecided, but I definitely don't want to look at bonds aside from the ones we looked at last year.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wouldn't be in support of these as they stand currently. I think they're both extremely important, but we know that the wastewater utilities, even with the rate increase, is going to need a substantial amount of more funding to really address core issues. And in a similar vein with the school districts, there's still a lot of unknowns with their budget and structuring. So I'm supportive of the spirit of these two, but as they stand currently, not. And going back to what the mayor and Assembly Member Smith was saying about, do we look at, trying to get more undergo bonds? I think that would be worth discussing further.
Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, it's not surprising. It's February that I feel similarly like, I don't know. We need to get further in the budgeting process for me to say yay or nay, but I would say yes to keeping the door open. And I'm trying to figure out how to convey that in a way that's helpful to you and to staff. As far as scheduling goes, I am interested potentially in exploring other bonds than these, but I need to do a little homework to know whether I would support that or not. I think like Mr. Brooks was just saying, I think there are things that are similar iteration that could be revised, like revising the numbers up potentially. Sorry to put words in your mouth, Mr. Brooks, that's not exactly what you said, but for the utility is one, a drum I'll keep beating. And then I don't love that model of putting our reoccurring maintenance on the geobonding, but I do think it is the companion piece to what passed as a potential tool. And it's not a tool I like, but again, I don't like the property tax cap. So I think if I explore with staff and I say that's definitely not something I want, then I'll be happy to let this committee know. But for now, I think it's potential that we might want to explore it as we sharpen our pencils.
I'll go last. I think I maybe in a slightly different place than you guys. I'm feeling pretty confident that I would like to put bonds on the ballot. I definitely agree that, looking at these two closer again, is a good idea if we're to do it. I'd stick with these because they're things that we need and we did the work. And I think at the end of the day, why we put things on ballots are to give voters the choice. If they don't want to fund these things, then they won't. We don't lose anything because of that. It, um, and I will also say that because I have been sitting down and trying to get everything we want to talk about into our calendar for the next 3 months, I understand why you guys are all where you're at, and where I'm at, I don't see how we do it all. And so I'm, going to need some help prioritizing. I probably said that same thing last year, but it's just, without having more, we can't add more meetings without people, stopping doing this anymore. So, just be thoughtful, I guess, on where your priorities are, and we'll keep putting these things on the agenda, but it's going to get real tough for us, I think. So I feel like I know where we're at. So we'll, definitely plan on revisiting these two, not so that, we'll make a decision at some point whether to put them on. And if there are people who still want to think about other things, they can do that homework and try to make a pitch to spend some more time as a group on that. Does that sound good? Mr. Kelly, go ahead.
Yes, I think I can agree with that plan. I was also going to suggest if the school capital improvement bonds is going to be scheduled at some point, that perhaps before we have that meeting, maybe the joint facilities committee between the school district and the assembly might find some time to meet.
I think that's a great idea. Who's the chair? Is that you?
That would be, I believe it's Assemblymember Steininger.
Okay. Mr. Brooks.
I do all the school board stuff, and that's where my comments have spawned. They're still getting, there's a lot of uncertainties in there. So, there even light discussion, don't know if there will need to be further consolidation or not, depending on what they figure out with the budget. So, it could be a very different picture after the funds get approved.
Yep, I think that's an important context. So I like the idea of getting that committee back together and getting some school board feedback on that, if it's still relevant. All right, Mayor Weldon.
I'll jump in right now so you don't forget me. I had 2 items that had nothing to do with the agenda, but first of all, I'm just hoping the assembly will humor me on this, but I've asked staff to look at our partner agencies and just ask them what cuts they would make to the partner agencies, because they're a little more familiar with them than we are. So just letting everybody know about that. And just so you know that it would be totally up to us, but it would just be interesting to see their take on that. So Mr. Barr and I talked about that. Don't worry, Manager Kester. And then I'm just letting everybody know that tomorrow I'm testifying on the governor's budget. We do have a resolution in place, so I'll just take the high points off that. Thanking the governor to put something on the table, because our resolution says broad-based tax, but it does hurt municipalities with sales tax. A little bit on local control, and we'd just like to learn more about it, but I'm just letting people know that I will be testifying. Wow. At 5:30, I believe. So I'll ask Ms. Adkison the right time later. And Mr. Jardell will be joining me, of course.
Manager Kester.
Just to clarify, I do know, Mayor Weldon, I was there, and I'm sorry, I had misunderstood your request, but I want to clarify for the body so that you understand what we've been asked to do. We have been asked to give a staff recommendation for cuts, so not to reach out to those partner agencies. I think you guys are doing that through the course of having the meetings with them, but for staff to take a look at that, at CBJ staff, to manager's office to take a look at that and report that back to you.
Ms. Euskandis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a bit of confusion still, but you also might note my skepticism. So where in the process, because so you're saying the mayor has asked staff to do something that is not going to be what you recommend in the manager's budget, but this is something I can expect to see at a future finance meeting? Question mark?
Yeah, you can't nod at me because you're not the chair. That's why I'm asking tonight if the assembly will humor me on that request. Apologies if I didn't make that clear. I just wanted to see what they had to say. But they are presenting their budget, or the manager is presenting her budget, and then just some discussion with Mr. Barr about some of his experience on a couple of these things. I just said, well, that'd be interesting to hear what your guys' take were. So, and we do not have to follow it at all whatsoever. We'll be listening to all of them, and you can hear me tonight say, what does it look like without 30%? So just I figured parallel pathways, it's always interesting to get more information. But you guys can say, forget it if you want.
Just a point of order here. We can talk about this as long as I say we can, is like tonight. Is that correct? We're off agenda, so I'm just trying to remember. Does anyone remember? Mr. Kelly does.
I believe I believe you do have a little bit of leeway. I would of course defer to Ms. Wright if she were here. I believe the chair does have a little bit of leeway. I think it would probably venture into maybe hazardous territory if we started to make formal decisions that weren't on the agenda.
Chair Wall, I can wait till Monday when we talk about comments and questions also.
Okay.
That'd
Yep.
be easier for you, sorry.
No, it's okay.
It just came up
It-
because we were
it was-
talking to partner agencies, so I can wait.
I was with kind of Mr. Kelly in my brain that, I'm happy you're letting us know what you're doing. And then when it became a question back to us, I was just getting nervous. So maybe if you want to ask us a question, you can do that on Monday. But thanks for giving us a heads up, Ms. Euskandis.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you. I appreciate that. And I do sometimes we trip over our own feet, and I don't think the public realizes how hard it is for us to get together and have more freewheeling conversations. And so I do appreciate hearing what people are talking to staff about and what all of these things. So should have led with gratitude for that, mixed with my skepticism.
All right, that brings us to item 6. There's an updated AFC budget calendar in your packet. And then there is also a red folder item, which the only change is we added an assembly listening session on April 22nd. We are still working on this, and we'll keep coming back to you in different forms as we go, but that's where we're at right now. Anything else I missed on that, Ms. Flick?
So this actually has changed a lot since you saw it in January. So just know that it's a lot different. We do have joint meetings scheduled. So the next AFC meeting is actually a joint meeting with the airport and BRH on February 25th. Different, not the first, it's the last Wednesday. Those are going to look like the manager of, so Mr. Delgado and Mr. Warner presenting their respective budgets, just like we would have normally done on that full Saturday retreat, and then shifting into a joint meeting. So that's happening on February 25th. We are having a similar discussion presentation just with Eagle Crest on March 4th. And then on March 18th, which is not a normal AFC meeting, we'll be doing the same thing with Docks and Harbors and the Board of Education. So you'll hear a presentation from those, from the superintendent of schools, from the port director on their particular budgets, and then shifting into that joint meeting.
Any questions on schedule? Ms. Euskandis?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a quick one on, and knowing this is all fluid and continues to change as things change. The gondola is scheduled right now for April 1st. I think the last time we talked about this, we expected we were out for bids and, I'm just wondering if we're gonna get in a different committee maybe, but if we're gonna get an updated either numbers or something on gondola, or if this is when I would expect to see the gondola the next time in the Assembly's process, minus of course, March 4th, where I'm sure we will talk about it.
The bid award for the GCCM contract is scheduled for your February 9th meeting. And that's the document we've been waiting for to provide some clarity to cost estimates on the gondola. But I want to caution that there is still by no means an accurate cost estimate because we're still at 35% design. We just now have a firm selected that will bring us to 100% design. And then of course, there will be an assembly decision whether or not to proceed. So that's a long way of saying you are going to get better information, but still incomplete information. You will be making decisions based on incomplete information, which is the challenge of your profession, I know. And right now, April 1st is when we are is when the body is next scheduled to talk about the gondola, and that is when we plan on, giving you a presentation on both the business plan and cost of the gondola and some paths forward.
Great, thank you.
All right. Brings us to next meeting date. As we discussed, we're having some joint meetings on February 26th. And with that, we are adjourned.